Go. Mics and hello, and welcome back again to the latest in our VentureSome series with Ecotourism Australia. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Craig and Meryl Eddy from Boobook Tours in Roma, which is in central outback Queensland. Welcome, guys.
Hello, thanks, Simon.
It's interesting to be talking to people in out bush because most of the products we talk to obviously are based in the coastal regions of Australia. So it's nice to be in the dry land. So
sometimes.
to start out then, tell us a little bit about the landscape that you live in and the area that you work in.
We live in a semi-arid area that's located about 6 hours west of Brisbane. So we're to the south of the Carnarvon Ranges. The area around Roma itself, where our business is based, is quite an agricultural area. It's got rich soils and those sorts of things. But we have to the north some very rugged sandstone environments, which are very scenic, and people may know places like Carnarvon Gorge or the Arcadia Valley. So yeah, that's a bit of a background on where we live.
So we're looking at which of the landscapes were we looking at there?
So the landscape on the screen, that was part of the Carnarvon Range, part of one of our day tour properties, in fact. So some very spectacular scenery up in that part of the world.
And you run a variety of trips, but you do a lot of work on private land. So you're consultants. So in your other part of your job, you get paid to assist developers, landowners, and so on in their own ecological outcomes, which gives you access to these private land areas. And these private land areas you just referred to in the Carnarvon Gorge regions, they're within the Great Barrier Reef catchment, aren't they? Can you sort of explain the significance of that?
Yeah, that's correct, Simon. So we in Roma here, we're located in the Murray-Darling catchment, but around about 60 kilometres north of town, we actually cross the Great Divide. Not that you'd really know, it's not a spectacular crossing or anything, but as soon as we cross over, we go into that Dawson Fitzroy catchment, which is the very upper reaches of the Great Barrier Reef catchment. So even though we're quite some hundreds of kilometres inland, we're part of that catchment. So everything that happens upstream, I guess, ultimately can have an impact on the Great Barrier Reef downstream. So there are some landholders up in that area who are eligible for funding for projects to help on-ground works, such as fencing off riparian areas and all those sorts of things.
So Meryl, tell me about the decision to branch into tourism from consultancy. I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah, Simon, it's something that Craig and I have been thinking about for many years. So I guess just a little bit of background. We started the ecological consulting business back about 20 odd years ago. So I've been running that, and we also have our own farm that we do as well on the side. But we've always thought that there's a real niche in this area. There's some beautiful areas, some hidden gems, some great landscapes that the average Joe Blow just doesn't get a chance to get to or even know about. So with our consulting side and our ecological background and the passionate team that we have here within Boobook, we decided to branch into ecotourism about 3 years ago, so about in 2017. So that's been a journey, but a very fun journey as we learn the industry and the trade around tourism. But the feedback and just the awe and the knowledge that our guides like Craig and a few of our other staff like Richard and Rose and Michael, they're all great people and very, very passionate. They love sharing the stories and sharing their knowledge about our local area. But it's not ecology side, so we've got a rich industry, agricultural history as well. So that natural history side combined with the industry, agricultural, creates a really great experience for anybody that wants to come along. in areas like the Carnarvon Ranges, where Carnarvon Gorge National Park also exists. In the Great Dividing Range, there are some fantastic hidden secrets, hidden areas. There's also like streams, all sorts of things, platypus, the wildlife, the animals, the rare and threatened, as well as the common species that you'd see during a tour. It's fantastic, and most people love it.
We were talking yesterday that could we share. Obviously, I have a background in ecology as well, and we were talking about how unique it is sometimes to run tours where you can take members of the public from all walks of life and actually have them be involved in something where they not only contribute science and data. That's what people understand about volunteerism and ecotourism and all other things about getting out and actually looking for nature, but there's a chance to actually very often discover new things. So you talk about the private land, and you mentioned to me that you run what you call Ecoscience Expeditions from time to time. Tell me about one of those that you've done recently in the Carnarvon region.
Yeah, I'll probably hand over to Craig for that. So that's something that we brought on last year. We run tours to around wildflowers and all sorts of things, but we really wanted to branch in. Like our passion is understanding more about the environment and sharing that knowledge, and that's where the Eco Science Expedition came about. We ran our first one last year that Craig led, and we were very excited to do that and hope to run a lot more into the future. Do you want to?
Yeah, so with our work in this area over the past 25 years or so, we've got a pretty good handle on places that have been, well documented in terms of biodiversity assessments and those sort of things, and also the areas that haven't been so well explored, and a lot of those are on private land. So we set about to explore an area of the upper Dawson River that's located in the Carnarvon Ranges on private land. So it's the only way we could access, or the public can access that land. And some of the things we wanted to achieve was to put together a complete fauna and flora inventory, a species list, if you like, of what we saw. And we were particularly looking for things, plants and animals, that were a little bit, out of their range, or significant in terms of their legislative status, like they might be rare or threatened. So, and we were lucky enough on our first trip to find a species of plant that hadn't been recorded in that area before, and in fact it turned out to be a range extension by a couple of 100 kilometres. So that was nice for our very first expedition to come up with those sort of results, and everybody helped out in the data collection as well. So, and that information ultimately will become available publicly as well.
So it's
Sorry.
as much about gaining that extra information and that research. It also allows, so some of the people that came on that tour really wanted to learn and understand the techniques involved in conducting ecological surveys. So not only did they learn about the species and the area and what was there at that particular location, but they also got to spend time with expert ecologists like Craig here to understand the techniques and to pick their brains about different aspects of not only the methods used, but the what that animal or what's significant about a particular plant and how you ID them and all those sort of things as well.
What I find interesting, I moved to Australia about 20 years ago, and I suspect that I'm not dissimilar to many Australians at that time. You go into the bush and it's dominated by a lot of similar types of vegetation, like eucalypt trees, and you see something quite uniform, but the reality is that it's not. It's extremely diverse, and sometimes it does take that extra little bit of knowledge. One of the things I'm fascinated to hear more about, Craig, I understand you have a particular penchant for land snails. Now, for those people listening, mollusks, snails, slugs, and so on are one of the most diverse species of groups of animals on planet Earth. They're extremely successful. And when you find there's such an abundance of land snails in Australia, it may come as a surprise, because we're such an arid country, that these kind of slimy, wet creatures can exist in such a dry place. But they lend themselves to really understanding that whole patchwork mosaic, don't they, of of landscapes that you get. Tell me a little bit about your work with those and what you discover.
Sure. So I've been collecting land snails ever since childhood. So it's been a pretty serious hobby. I first started collecting snails along the Toowoomba Range where I grew up, and basically there was no internet back then. Showing my age, I'm sorry. And very few reference books as well. So the only way to get those identified was to send them to the curators at the Queensland Museum at the time. So this is when I was in my very early teens. So I started to build a relationship, sent some specimens into the Queensland Museum, and lo and behold, some of them came back as new species. So I thought, well, this is pretty cool. So, and I didn't really have to go that far to find a new species, virtually on the back door of a major city in southeast Queensland. So it all started from there. Basically, that spurred me on to keep going out into the Australian bush and collecting our native land snails and submitting more and more specimens into the museum. And that work's continued right through till now. And it's been a privilege to work in a lot of areas where people haven't explored previously, and we've come up with probably over 100 new species over in this area alone. And you're right to say that many of those are significant in that snails, they can't travel very far or very easily. If they're not in a damp place, they basically dry out. So you get a whole range of species that might be confined, say, to a single mountaintop or a little patch of vine thicket or dry rainforest on the slope of a ridge. And those species are virtually trapped there in time. So gradually we're finding all these little special areas, and pretty much wherever we go that has those characteristics will turn up another new species. So it's quite exciting.
Wow, so you're really getting to understand the kind of humidity infrastructure of a really dry and arid environment, and I'll throw up just a quick picture here, because you mentioned micro snails to me yesterday. So we obviously showed some pictures of some bigger versions, but there are some websites I think I found yesterday. If you search on Australian land snails, there's a whole catalogue of different lovely names of different types, but many of them are tiny, aren't they? And they have these really elaborate and beautiful shells.
That's correct. So the biggest species we have in Australia is probably about a human fist size, which is not big by world standards, but it's pretty big for Australia. But the majority of the species are probably around pinhead size, or up to a couple of millimetres in diameter at the most. So the way we have to find those is actually to extract a bag of soil and leaf litter from the place we're going to, and then sieve that and put it under a microscope and basically sort through every grain of soil and pick out these little tiny snails that are living in the leaf litter. And that's generally where the most significant species are. It's those tiny ones, not the bigger ones we happen to see as we're walking around.
Well, I think you know what, regardless of what you're looking at in the Australian landscape, it's fascinating. But those of us who have spent time there realise that the closer you look, the more you find. The tiny things are often the most colourful and beautiful in a landscape that can otherwise look, as I say, a bit uniform. Final question. I mean, what are your I guess personal ambitions going forward, and what do you hope the combination of tourism and science that you're doing could achieve in your world, in your part of the world?
I think we'll probably both have a go at answering this. The one of our passions is about sharing the knowledge and the information that's gained. We've built up some great partnerships with some wonderful landowners who really care about the land that they manage and look after and provide a food bowl for the rest of Australia. But they really care about the soil and the animals and the native animals and plants and what's there. So it's been great working with them, and some of the information that we collect certainly goes into, they take that on board and look at how they can manage and look after those assets that they do have. and the other is just the general community. There's a lot of people, like even locally, they're astonished about when you start up a conversation about what we do have here. A lot of times we're busy doing what we're doing, and we don't necessarily know all that we have in our backyard. And it's great to be able to share that not only with locals but with people that come from Brisbane, the sunny coast, Victoria, and even our international visitors who love to see that, and they also, I guess, take away our passion and understanding of what's here. Which it's really great to see that infection happening. It's probably the wrong time to say that with COVID, but it's really great
the right
to see,
kind of infection.
Yeah, really great to see that like that transition of knowledge.
Absolutely. I totally agree with everything Meryl has said there. And like you said before, it's often those little tiny things that we can point out that as ecologists we often take for granted. But the thrill someone gets from just seeing a little caterpillar and you tell the story of, what it turns into and then its role within the environment and all those sorts of things that just seem insignificant, but people learn from that, and hopefully we can get a good message out at the end of the day.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk. Needless to say, it's obvious why you guys are Ecotourism Australia accredited. I don't think we need to discuss that further. I would certainly obviously encourage everyone to jump on the Boobook Eco Tours website and check you guys out and consider you for a trip at some point. Follow Ecotourism Australia, check out the Green Guide, jump onto Wildiaries as well. We're all on social media, as everyone is these days, right across the world. It's been really interesting talking, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again at some stage. Thanks very much for your afternoon, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Same to you, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
Love being on board.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
No worries. Bye-bye.